Okay, it's 7:03 and we will begin. Welcome everyone to the discussion of the new documentary, The Story of Plastic. This event will be recorded. I am Pat Hersey, co-founder of Less Plastic Please.
I'm Liz Feighner with HoCo Climate Action and Green Team Chair at Emmanuel United Methodist Church. Pat and I will be moderators for the evening.
Hi, and I'm Carolyn Parsa, Chair of the Howard County Sierra Club. Thank you for viewing The Story of Plastic and for joining us for this discussion. Gary Young from the Maryland Sierra Club chapter will be facilitating the technical aspects of this discussion behind the scenes.
The discussion this evening takes place during unsettling and tragic times. We are in the midst of a pandemic where higher mortality rates for people of color reveal this country's systemic racism. And we have also witnessed repeated acts of police violence against African Americans. Plastic pollution is also both an environmental justice and a public health crisis. Fracking, production, litter, landfills, and incineration harm communities of color disproportionately. These are historic times as more people in this country and around the world take up the fight against racism and for racial justice. Social justice, racial justice, environmental justice. We believe these are all part of a single globally connected movement for justice.
Thank you, Liz, for those powerful comments. Since this discussion is all about reducing plastic, we would be remiss without thanking some dedicated elected officials who advocated for the Howard County plastic bag bill. Without Delegate Terry Hill, who sponsored our enabling bill, we would not have had a plastic bag fee bill in Howard County. Senator Clarence Lamb gave a compelling testimony in the Senate. County Council members Opal Jones and Christiana Rigby, sponsor and co-sponsor, respectively, guided us to success. And added thanks to the other county council members, Liz Walsh and Deb Young, who voted in favor of the bill, and of course, our county executive, Calvin Ball. We believe all that hard work at the county level improved the chances of the statewide plastic bag ban, sponsored by Delegate Brooke Lierman and Senator Malcolm Augustine. The bill was looking very promising, but the session ended abruptly due to the pandemic before it could be considered on the Senate floor. This event is intended for everyone who is concerned about the plastic pollution crisis. By building support and providing information at the county level, we can create momentum at the state level and beyond, and we must. We have 6 distinguished panelists to help us reach those goals. Alex Cole, David Pinksy, Sarah Nichols, Josh Feldmark, Alexandra DySard, and Brooke Lierman. You'll be learning more about their incredible credentials shortly and what they've been doing to address the issue. We look forward to hearing your questions and their answers. Now, I will turn it over to Liz for some housekeeping. Liz?
We will be hearing first from each of the panelists, 4 minutes each, to follow 25 minutes or more for questions at the end of their remarks. Because so many people are on this call, everyone has been muted. So please submit your questions to us by using the Q&A button at the bottom of the page. Also, if you want to direct your question to a particular panelist, please indicate that. You may submit your questions at any time during the discussion, and please use the chat box to alert us to any technical issues you may be having.
So to start this discussion off, I would like to share 4 personal takeaway messages from the story of plastic. The story of plastic has so many jarring facts, but an outrageous moment for me is how we've been hoodwinked by big business. That Keep America Beautiful campaign was founded in 1953 by a group of businessmen from the beverage and packaging industry who were concerned that the government would make them responsible for solving the litter problem by regulating their industries. What a thought. They have had several campaigns since the 1950s, from don't be a litter bug to people start pollution, people can stop it. Do you hear the subliminal messaging? Now recycling. Recycling became the ideal concept for the industry to yet again place the onus of plastic waste onto the consumer while relieving the industry of responsibility. The implication is simple. If people would just recycle more, the problem would be solved. If we learned anything from the movie, we know that is not true. My second takeaway, it is time to turn off the tap. All of the sponsors and many of the co-sponsors of tonight's event worked diligently to pass a Howard County bag bill. But honestly, after watching the movie, I feel like we simply jiggled the tap a little bit. Individual and community actions are vital, but we all know the ultimate solutions lie in the production and the corporate responsibility. My third takeaway is by uniting our voices, change can happen. Over the last few weeks, we all saw what happens when we unite. Calling or emailing your elected officials, as well as peaceful protesting, are powerful steps to create change. My last takeaway, this is what our away is. The plastic pollution crisis and our throwaway mentality has also created an international environmental justice issue. This photograph illustrates how our current abuse of the earth is simply not sustainable. We are living on a planet with finite resources, yet our lifestyles indicate the opposite. We are willing to use a non-renewable resource to produce a plastic bag that is used for 12 minutes? Is this who we want to be? But perhaps more frightening than the visual horrors of plastic pollution is what we cannot see, our selfish cultural attitude. Shifting our mindset away from the wants to focus on our needs is the other challenge that we face as we address the plastic crisis. If we keep living as if there's no tomorrow, there will be no tomorrow. I see plastic pollution as a symptom of a world that values money, overconsumption, and convenience at the expense of everything else. Humanity is in crisis, but even in these dark days, there is light. Now is a time to reimagine and build a better Maryland. We have time to act, but we don't have time to wait. So let's hear how we can work together and solve these problems. With that, I will turn it over to Liz that will introduce our first speaker. Liz.
Thank you, Pat. We are pleased to have Delegate Jessica Feldmark, Delegate Jen Terrassa, and Senator Guy Gazzoni on the call. And we have a wonderful panel lined up. Our first panelist is Alex Cole, an organizer with OVEC, the Ohio Valley Environmental Coalition. Alex's organizing work is focused on stopping the proposed Appalachian storage hub known as ASH, a huge petrochemical complex where cracker plants would turn frack gas into plastic. He also leads the Reimagine Our Appalachian Region project, which promotes sustainable living and economic development in the Ohio and Kanawha river valleys as an alternative to ash. He has a BS in environmental geography and a BA in US history, and previously worked as an extension agent with West Virginia State University. He volunteered with OVEC gathering baseline data from streams harmed by the Mountaineer Express pipeline. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, as Liz mentioned, I work for the Ohio Valley Environmental Coalition. We're an organization headquartered in Huntington, West Virginia. That's about as far away from Maryland as you can get and still be in West Virginia. Far western point there where Kentucky, Ohio, and West Virginia come together. OVAC was started over 30 years ago by a group of women who came together to fight a chemical waste incinerator that was slated to be built by BASF on the Ohio side of the river, but right next to Huntington. And that is a reoccurring theme we have here. We're working in multiple states across the river that is the border between a lot of states and a lot of different governments and bureaucracies and DEPs and EPAs and whatnot. If you might have become aware of OVAC in recent decades fighting mountaintop removal. A lot of the stuff in the last couple decades about mountaintop removal was us. So we've been around and we've been fighting a lot of the good fight for a long time. But in recent years, we have shifted our focus to fight this Appalachian storage hub, as Liz mentioned. It was mentioned for a minute in the movie, but this was a plan come up with by our delegates and legislators and governors to turn the Appalachian or the Ohio River Valley into a 300-mile long petrochemical corridor, much like you saw on the Gulf Coast in this movie. The fracking industry hasn't been making money, and they were looking for a second income stream for the frack Virginia and Western PA. And China was behind a lot of this. There was $83.7 billion promised to West Virginia from China. There's just a lot of corruption and weird politics and backroom deals. And my job has been for the last couple years to run up and down the river and let people know what is coming, because unfortunately a lot of these things are pushed through backroom deals. The only notification is in some local paper in a small town that no one outside of that county reads. And these are huge national corporations building billion-dollar crackers, again, just to turn fracked gas into new virgin plastic pellets to be made into all the products that you've seen in this movie. And we all know where that ends up. Of course, like most everything right now, a lot of stuff is up in the air, and the economy and the economics behind this stuff is up in the air similarly. But I am going to start right away and get this out there, because it's a drumbeat that we all need to make, is the industry's economic woes are not from COVID-19. These economic woes predate anything that happened with COVID-19. Plastic prices are down by half. Frack gas the bubble is bursting. They overproduced, and now they are in the bust part of that natural cycle. And I believe that's probably about my 4 minutes. So I'll let someone else speak. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Alex. And thank you for your dedication. Our next panelist is David Pinksy. David is a senior plastic campaigner with Greenpeace USA based in Oakland. David has led nationwide campaigns on climate and energy, seafood, and now plastic. David specializes in corporate campaigns that move companies contributing to the plastic pollution crisis away from single-use plastic. He has written several Greenpeace reports, including Carting Away the Oceans, Sea in Distress, and Packaging Away the Planet. David holds a master's in psychology from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and a bachelor's in psychology from the University of Kentucky. Welcome, David. Your work is very timely.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to reflect on recently an Oceans themed fire drill Friday with Jane Fonda and my colleague John Hocevar, who said the most important thing we can do for the ocean right now is to support the movement for Black lives. I believe the same goes for the plastics movement. Tomorrow marks 1 month since George Floyd's murder by Minneapolis police. And in the 4 weeks, we've seen millions of people take action worldwide in defense of Black lives. This is a historic time to transform our governments, our businesses, our institutions, and to eliminate the building blocks of systemic racism and injustice. The fight for the environment and for social justice are one of the same. We must tackle the root causes of injustice and exploitation if we want a healthy planet. As marine biologist and policy expert Ayanna Johnson said recently in the Washington Post, how can we expect Black Americans to focus on climate change when they are so at risk on their streets, in their communities, and even within their own homes? The story of plastic shows how the entire life cycle of plastic is toxic, from the extraction of fossil fuels to the disposal of plastic waste, which disproportionately impacts Black and brown communities. As plastics are a climate problem, an environmental problem, a pollution problem, fueled by corporate greed and malfeasance. As Tiza in Jakarta tells us in the film, industry is pushing the idea that plastic pollution is all because of bad waste management, because they know that this distracts or tries to distract us from the truth, that only 9% of all plastics ever created have been recycled. Even more have been incinerated and landfilled. So we all know that recycling alone is not going to solve this crisis. In March, Greenpeace released Circular Claims Fall Flat, a report that surveyed recycling centers nationwide. We found that most types of single-use plastics, particularly numbers 3 through 7, are ending up in landfills and incinerators and polluting our environment. There's no value or market for most plastics, especially as cheap natural gas fuels and massive global petrochemical expansion, making virgin plastics cheaper than recycled plastics. And as plastic, as we've been seeing in the press, is literally raining down from the sky, we must act now to eliminate single-use plastics. That's why Greenpeace is campaigning on brands like Coca-Cola, Nestle, Walmart, Target to ditch single-use plastics and switch to reuse and refill. No matter how much big money corporations throw at elected officials or greenwashing, one thing they'll never be able to match is our greatest strength: people power. The fossil fuel and plastics industries are terrified. They know the time of throwaway plastics is ending. In response to COVID-19 and misleading propaganda from the plastics industry, we've seen that some companies and local and state governments have backtracked on plastics bans. So we must ensure that these are only temporary. As we continue to debunk the idea that single-use plastics are safer than reusables. This week, Greenpeace and Upstream released a statement signed by 120 health and medical professionals from around the world demonstrating that indeed reusables can be used safely, even during a time of COVID-19. Together, we're making waves in the boardrooms of corporations. I commend you all for your work in Howard County and at the state capitals in Maryland to California, and even on the federal level with the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. Let's continue to demand companies and elected officials eliminate single-use plastics and switch to reuse and refill. Let's continue to fight for communities on the front lines of fossil fuel extraction and plastic waste disposal. And let's continue to listen to and support the leaders of the movement for Black lives to dismantle the institutional barriers to justice that only then will make it possible for us to create a green, peaceful, and thriving future. Thank you so much for being a part of this movement.
I'd like to, thank you, David, that was really enlightening. I'd like to introduce Sarah Nichols. Sarah is a waste and recycling policy expert with more than 10 years of experience working on local and state policy in New England. Her role is director of the National Resources Council of Maine, NRCM, the state's leading environmental advocacy organization. She was successful in helping pass Maine's bans on single-use plastic bags and foam foodware. The organization is deeply committed to protecting and expanding Maine's extended producer responsibility policies. Sarah has a BS in Environmental Resource Economics from the University of New Hampshire and an MS in Environmental Science and Management from the Bren School at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Welcome, Sarah.
Great, thanks Liz, and hi everybody. Good evening from Maine. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this important discussion. Yeah, I'm here to really just talk to you about our experience in Maine dealing with with plastics pollution in particular. I do work on all kinds of different waste policies and can talk about those. I really think it's important that we all share information between states and countries. And you know, this is totally an all hands on deck kind of situation. I completely agree with David that this is a, you know, we need to look past some of these one-off fixes, and it's systemic change that we really need to do. So, you know, I work, it's an environmental advocacy organization. We're a nonprofit. I'm not part of the state. We have about 30 staff located in Augusta, and we've been around since 1959. I've been at NRCM for 7 years. And just recently, we switched from defense mode to offense mode on some policies. I got a little excited last year. We put in about 10 plastics related bills to work on. We were successful in passing our single-use plastic bag ban, which has been, implementation's been delayed until January due to the pandemic. And the foam foodware ban will go into effect January 1. We also had bills that would address recycled content in beverage containers, bottle caps, balloons, tobacco litter, reusable foodware. None of those passed, but notably, what I would like to talk to you all about the most is this extended producer responsibility for packaging law. We touched on that, the story of plastic touched on that in the film, and this is really, to me, what we need to be doing is shifting from this consumer blame kind of approach, which the industry is absolutely doing, to putting more producer responsibility. In Maine, we're a leader in this policy realm. We have extended producer responsibility laws for mercury containing products like thermostats, mercury auto switches, CFL light bulbs, paint, rechargeable batteries. I'm not going to name them all here because I'm sure I'll forget some. And we have one of the most comprehensive bottle bills in the nation that I'm having to defend every single year. You know, Maine was poised to become one of the first state in the nation to pass this extended producer responsibility bill for packaging, but unfortunately the legislature, you know, postponed indefinitely before the bill was able to leave committee with a favorable vote and go up for to the House. So, you know, in Maine, I believe the extended producer responsibility approach to packaging in particular has always been important and the way to go and the way to address things. But with recycling, just the markets and recycling programs floundering has really just exposed these fundamental flaws that we need to fix in our programs. In Maine, we estimated that municipalities spend anywhere between $16 to $17.5 million per year on managing packaging waste alone. So this isn't just plastic, it's paper, cardboard, glass, either through recycling or through disposal. We have a pretty low 36% and falling recycling rate here in Maine. We've had a recycling goal of 50% for 30 years, and nothing's worked. And the answer is not to spend more taxpayer dollars in a piecemeal, fragmented fashion. We need to involve the producers. We need to get money to the municipalities to help them support these programs. And by doing so, set up the fees in a way that really targets design and waste reduction and reuse. So I'm happy to talk to you all more about that in the questions, and I'm just really excited to be a part of this discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, so much. And the movie certainly emphasized the importance of the EPR legislation, so we will be rooting for your EPR packaging bill. And now I am pleased to introduce our very own Joshua Feldmark. Josh is the Director of Howard County Office of Community Sustainability, where he manages environmental and sustainability policies in Howard County. He served as the founding director of the Howard County Office of Environmental Sustainability. He is the former executive director of 2 organizations, Bike Maryland and R Maryland. He has a bachelor's degree in ecology from Rutgers University and a master's degree in environmental law and policy from Vermont Law School. Welcome, Josh. We are very lucky to have you here in Howard County. We'd love to hear what's happening at the local level.
So I have a particularly, I think, unique perspective on sustainability issues and waste reduction and recycling here in Howard County. As you all just heard, if you didn't know, in 2007, I was made the founding director of the Office of Environmental Sustainability. And one of the first issues that we tackled was this issue of waste. And we embraced single stream recycling. At the time, we were shown, and it sort of became obvious that at the time, we could bring all types of recycling in. We had our catchy little expression all together now. We brought everybody these beautiful, shiny new blue bins, and that we dramatically increased our recycling rates. And that at the time, because of the markets the way they were, that there was this ability to recycle all of the stuff and know that when certain markets were collapsing, other markets were booming, and then collectively, it was all breaking even for us. We were at certain times actually making some money off of our recycling. So we really just kind of went all in on this issue and believed that it was fantastic because it was a way for us to say to the citizenry, this is it. This is how you're going to reduce the waste stream. Just everything you got, you know, if you're not even sure if it's recyclable, throw it in the bin. They're probably going to take care of it. And it was great. I took a 4-year break and came back in 2019, and the world of recycling had changed dramatically for reasons that most of us learned about in the movie. And what happened is that specifically around plastic is that the market collapsed so severely in terms of recycling that it was just, it couldn't hold up any of the other pieces. And so when I first met with my new boss, County Executive Calvin Ball, he really focused on this issue of searching for comprehensive, data-driven solutions. As he would say to me, he's like, look, these are complicated problems, and no silver bullet solution is really gonna get us there. And so that's obviously why we did things like, instead of fighting each development as a yes or no, we said let's completely redo the Forest Conservation Act, and let's fix the systematic problem and get down into the detail. And so that was the approach that we're taking. We're now just starting to think about how do we deal with this comprehensive waste issue. And there is not one solution. Recycling is still a key component as it relates to glass and cardboard and and all paper and aluminum. But how do we reduce our plastic levels? We now have expanded our curbside composting. That will solve, that is in the process of solving a whole other chunk of our waste problem. But the plastic piece of it, and specifically now that we have gotten the entire community bought into this concept of the answer is recycling. And so how do we say that was the answer for some of this, but now there is a different answer, and how do we do that in a way that we don't lose people? My office fields calls daily from tried and true environmentalists who are complaining about our lack of recycling this type of plastic, or whether or not we no longer recycle styrofoam because our vendor, who was a styrofoam manufacturer, was doing it essentially as a PR stunt, and then as soon as styrofoam was banned, said, well, it didn't give us the PR we wanted. And so now we have environmentalists calling us and saying, where do I recycle my styrofoam now? And so how do we go through with the community and do a comprehensive education that evolves into this next level? And so I don't have an answer for that. That's just the kind of question that I'm probably sort of throwing right back at you guys for help with how we do that.
Thank you, Josh, for letting us know what y'all are thinking about and hoping to do in Howard County. Next, we welcome Alexandra DySard. Allie is an environmental and partnership manager for Mom's Organic Market. She is also a board member with Trash Free Maryland and the Maryland Pesticide Education Network. She has a degree in environmental studies from the University of Washington, Seattle, and has held positions at the EPA, the City of Bellevue, and Pacific Science Center. She is an experienced environmental professional in sustainability planning, material management, natural resource conservation, and state and federal environmental policy. Allie is an outdoors and zero waste enthusiast who lives in Baltimore. Welcome, Allie.
Hi, so my name is Allie DySard, and I'm with Mom's Organic Market. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Mom's, we are a Maryland-based mid-Atlantic chain organic grocery store, and we're a little bit over 30 years. We have 30 years old. We have 19 stores and soon to be 2 more opening pretty soon. Our purpose as a company is to protect and restore the environment, and that is the lens that we look at every decision that we make at the company, from the types of seafood that we carry, which is only sustainably certified seafood, to the types of wood planks that we have in the customer service desk. This environmentalism is something very, very close to us. We were founded by environmentalists. We're led by environmentalists. I may have the title in my work title, but it's by no means am I the only person at the company who looks at this and thinks about it on a daily basis. Moms, we feel that climate change and environmental degradation is one of the greatest threats to mankind. We feel it affects every single one of us, and we know that marginalized communities are increasingly impacted the most by pollution, air and water quality issues, plastic waste, things like that. At my time at Moms, we've worked on a number of environmental policy bills. Some of you guys have spoken on these, styrofoam bans, plastic bag bans, different types of pesticide chemical bans, a fracking ban statewide in Maryland, and all of these things kind of seem to all have petrochemicals or a larger outside company coming into our state and trying to instill their beliefs on us and leave us in the dust and leave us having to pick up the pieces as far as the pollution that we get from it, air and water pollution, that kind of thing. It's really nice to work for a company and get to work with all these different environmental groups and really kind of stay at the forefront of thinking about these kinds of things and help draft policy and that kind of thing. A couple of wins that we have at Moms, we banned plastic bags in 2005. So it's something that when I get to speak about plastic pollution and alternatives, it's something that's very, very close to my heart. And it's something that we've not had to deal with for 15 years. They've been banned for 15 years at our stores. And as we see these state bans come up, it's actually really exciting. I know that 2018 with the China national sword policy, occurring and impacting and recycling basically collapsing 2 years ago, I'm skeptically optimistic that we're kind of at a turning point. So I know that the film was very sad and very heavy, but I think that with that, now people are talking about it. Now people are coming up with new policies to kind of move forward. So we banned plastic bags in 2005. We banned plastic water bottles, single-use water bottles in 2010. We use renewable powered energy. And so a lot of these kinds of things are ways that we can help other businesses kind of think this way and consult with them and talk to them on issues, environmental issues, and how we can move forward.
Okay, thank you, Allie. I just want you to know I'm a big fan of Moms, and I'm sure many, many people are. I love how you focus everything on what we can do to improve our future. So thank you for that. Because it's much bigger than money, so I appreciate everything you're doing. So now it's my pleasure and honor to introduce Delegate Brooke Lierman, who is in her second term in the Maryland House of Delegates, representing the 46th Legislative District in Baltimore. She serves in the House Environmental and Transportation Committee, where she's the chair of the Land Use and Ethics Subcommittee. In 2019, she successfully sponsored Maryland's statewide ban on selling foam food containers, due to go into effect July 1st. In 2020, she led the campaign in the House of Delegates for passage of the Plastic and Packaging Reduction Act. And thank you, Brooke. I could never thank you enough for your dedication to the environment. And so what are your reflections on the film?
Good evening, everybody. It's so great to be with you, and a shout out to my friends and colleagues, Delegates Feldmark and Terrassa and Senator Gazoon. It's great to be here, and thanks for letting me zoom into Howard County tonight from Baltimore City, where I live. So I was thrilled to see this film. I think it's incredibly powerful and brings up a lot of really important themes about why plastic pollution in general is so bad and so detrimental to our communities and to the world in so many different ways. A couple of things that I keep thinking about and that I want to emphasize tonight are, one, that this is a solvable problem. Two, that this is, that plastic and plastic pollution as a part of climate change is also a part of systemic racism in our country, and also sort of oppression of people of color and marginalized communities all over the world. And three, that we can make this is something that we can change and that will end up saving us money as well in the long run. So there is a fiscal reason for us to do better. So first, this is solvable. Of all the plastic that's ever existed, more than half has been produced in the past 15 years. When I first started working on plastic issues, an older gentleman came to me and he said, when I was growing up, we didn't have this issue. And it made me realize that, when I go see an alley strewn with plastic and people complain about the trash everywhere, and say, oh, it didn't used to be like this, it's because these didn't actually exist. These products didn't exist back then, and they exist now, and they have become super really, and just everywhere, they're omnipresent. So this is a solvable problem. We've lived without these products before, and we can live without them again. Two, I would say, I think several panelists have brought it up already tonight, but Black Americans have really borne the brunt of the fossil fuel era, dying from air pollution, cancer from exposure to toxic chemicals, severe weather at greater rates than the national average. And plastic is another part of that. When you go to neighborhoods that are under-resourced in our state, they often have more trash. There's corner stores selling things that are more disposable, and that's on purpose. That is not an accident. And if you are here in Baltimore City, for instance, our incinerator is located in a neighborhood that is predominantly Black Marylanders. And so those inhabitants, the people who live in that area, have much higher rates of heart disease and asthma. And this is all together. So both the creation of plastic, the plants are located in, as the movie indicated, are located in low-income communities. The trash is ending up in low-income communities, and when we are burning it at incinerators that are in low-income communities. None of this is acceptable, but it's why I think people for generations have turned a blind eye, and it can no longer be acceptable to exploit marginalized communities to have an item that we can use once and throw away just for our own convenience. Finally, this is so important because right now it's really expensive for city and counties to deal with all this trash. Since the pandemic started and since restaurants have started reopening, I live in Fells Point. We have many restaurants, and almost all the restaurants are doing outdoor dining right now, and they're all using single-use plastic items. It's really awful to see. Trash has increased exponentially, and trash pickup along with that has been increasing so much because all of this single-use plastic is going into waste bins outside that the city is responsible for. This is costing the city a lot of money to pick up and to store and to incinerate. So I just want to say that it's also, in addition to being a moral imperative and a climate imperative, this is also a fiscal imperative. And as we try to emerge from the pandemic and the economic recession, we have to be looking at ways that we can be more fiscally responsible. And getting rid of single-use plastics is one of the things that we can do. So thank you for having me tonight.
Oh, thank you, Brooke. You're ending on a very good note to know that it's solvable, and that's what we're all here for, and we're willing to go to bat for you to make sure we solve this problem. Thank you all to all the panelists tonight, and let's welcome all the panelists together so we can have our Q&A session. So Liz, you have a question to start with?
Yes, we do. I guess for David, how can we reconcile the need to avoid generating trash with the recommendations to discard masks, gloves, packaging during the pandemic? So I guess this is related to the pandemic that you're noticing in your surveys.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing, unfortunately, a lot of this PPE that is ending up in our waterways, and much of it is mimicking, say, a jellyfish, right? So our marine life is going after these single-use plastics. You know, we need to first and foremost make sure that healthcare workers are safe and all workers are taken care of. And, you know, particularly in some of our engagement with United Commercial and Food Workers that represents retail workers, you know, one of the things that is recommended to protect workers and folks in the public is that we are properly discarding gloves, masks, so making sure that that is not put on the floor, right, especially at a grocery store or in the parking lot. That does not solve the problem that this is creating a lot of waste. There are some great organizations out there, such as Healthcare Without Harm, that does work to transform the healthcare system and make sure that we can be reducing excessive amounts of waste. There are some ways, as I understand in engagement with Healthcare Without Harm experts, that you can have some better ways to be protecting medical professionals that are not going to produce so much waste. But like many of the things we're talking about tonight, that's a systemic issue. So we need to be ultimately putting pressure on plastic producers and some of these manufacturers, even hospitals, right? At a timely moment to say, hey, what are ways that we can ensure that the reuse revolution is also a part of healthcare? So highly encourage folks to check out Healthcare Without Harm.
Yeah, thanks, David. So I have a question, I believe, for Allie. What might be the best one to answer this? What would you tell consumers to help them to get away from plastic?
Yeah, I think that it's important, you know, to not let the plastic industry kind of hijack the conversation on single use and plastic reduction. We are, you know, scientists just came out and all signed on in support that packaging and plastic, that reusables were not, you know, a huge culprit of passing along COVID. So I think that's important. A lot of people have wanted to see single-use products back on the shelves, or back plastic bag bans I know have been put on hold and things like that. So I think it's important to not let them completely hijack the conversation. As far as opportunities, I think that consumers are at home and they're cooking a lot more themselves. So they're able to make smarter decisions if they're going to be at home. They're not going to be maybe ordering as much food. Maybe they can buy in bulk and they can make from scratch and that kind of thing that can limit the amount of single-use items that you're having to purchase. At Moms, we did not ban bringing your own reusables into the store. So you can still bring reusables. We ask that you package them yourself if the cashier isn't comfortable, but you're still able to do that because, I mean, it's not the biggest spreader of COVID that we feel, but we have had to increase the amount of plastic with plexiglass barriers, the plastic shields, plastic gloves, you know, PVE, that kind of stuff.
Thank you so much. We had a couple questions, I think for Alex, about the Appalachian Storage Hub and what people can do to help stop it, the pipelines as well. They're tired of filling out surveys. And then in addition, can you provide some more information about the hub?
Yeah, and I totally feel you there. And I'm not going to say call your representatives, but I'm going to say call your representatives because there is a lot you can do in Maryland to help us on the national level, because we might not have the best representation, but there is a very interesting bill right now that we just found out about this week that Senator Sanders is Bernie Sanders is co-sponsoring with Shelley Moore Capito, of all people, to help with the PFA issue. Not just in the Ohio River Valley, but nationally. And that's the class of chemicals that you might have heard about in the most recent Mark Ruffalo film, Dark Waters. And there's a documentary also that I'd suggest called The Devil We Know. There's also the Break Free from Plastics Act on the national level that we're watching. But beyond that, really, and I feel you, because believe me, I've sent enough letters to Joe Manchin to know that that doesn't really work. But I mean, what we need is time and money, and OVEC is a small staff of 6 people, and 3 of us are organizing along a 300-mile stretch of the Ohio River Valley. And as I said before, like the first step is educating and letting people know what's coming. And I mean, here I am talking to Maryland, trying to let everybody know nationwide, as well as locally, regionally, because this is a thing I don't have to explain to you that has implications on the global level as far as climate change, but you guys are downwind from us. So this stuff is going to affect you, and the Ohio River is drinking water source for 5 million people, and they are going to be dumping all kinds of stuff in this river if they build a storage hub. The pipelines, and we have a lot going on with the pipelines just as far as citizen science and doing the DEP and the EPA's job in monitoring the streams before, during, and after construction of some of these pipelines. So really what OVEC does and does well and has a long history of doing is making it as hard as we possibly can in every way we can on the industry, and trying to make it as expensive as it can be for them to these facilities. So I mean, our power is limited on the bureaucratic side of things, as you're saying, but it is strong the more numbers we have and the more we can do just to make it hard on the industry that's trying to do this. So I hope that's helpful.
Great, thank you, Alex. I believe the next question might go to Josh or anybody who wants to jump in. One of the questions says, maple lawn uses extensive amounts of pesticides and herbicides. What can we do? Can you help with that, Josh?
Maybe we, I mean, what I can say is that we have been trying to work with the various homeowners associations and the landscape companies. Obviously, recently that's been a little bit harder than it used to be, but you know, we at the county banned use on county government property of glyphosates and chlorpyrifos, as well as neonicotinoids, and as part of that process, we're hoping what it does is it, one, shows that you don't need these particular chemicals, that there are alternatives. And the other thing is, as the government, we can drive markets, right? So like inside Howard County, we have plenty of landscape contractors that the county hires, and now they have to follow our policy. And so the hope is that we're driving them to do that. And then it also is this opportunity for us to talk to the larger homeowners associations, obviously Columbia Association, but I think Maple Lawn would be another great opportunity to sit down with them and their landscaping contractors to try and show them the alternative.
Thanks. We have another question. This might be for Sarah and maybe for Josh as well. What about EPR for synthetic turf fields, 40,000 pounds of plastic in rugs plus more in landfills?
Sure. I saw that one in the Q&A and was thinking about it. I'm not aware of any EPR laws for synthetic turf, at least in the United States. But they, basically that there's been a lot of activity though with carpet in general. So it's not outdoor turf carpet. But I'm trying to think, so when you apply this extended producer responsibility idea to this, the producers of that turf would have some sort of, would have a role to play in the end of life management of that turf. And I don't know how often, I guess I don't know enough to answer it more.
So I can say that there was a bill to do that introduced in the Maryland legislature this past session by Delegate Mary Lierman. It's HB 1547. No, I did not remember that off the top of my head. But it would have required a producer of turf or turf infill to come up with a stewardship plan, basically, and submit that plan to the Department of Environment for review and approval. It was in Economic Matters, didn't come out with a favorable report, but it is there. People are looking at it. And if you're interested in this idea, please get in touch with Delegate Mary Lehman, Lehman.
Thank you. What, Josh, do you have, because we have, how many county fields do we have that are turf? And aren't they coming up to be replaced soon?
Yeah, and I don't actually know the answer to that question. I have not. I can certainly find out and get back to everybody. Positive guess.
I know that Safe Grow Montgomery in Montgomery County had a bill similar to this in their county this past election or general legislative session time. So if somebody was looking at drafting a bill for Howard County or for Baltimore City or whatever, that might be a resource that they could look into, Safe Grow Montgomery.
Cool.
Great. Well, here's one for Sarah about the EPR. I mean, it's a mouthful and it's hard to get the point across to people exactly what it is. Is there language that you feel people respond to when you explain it to them?
I talk to people about extended producer responsibility.
Right.
Yes. Well, I mean, you know, our when we use the word shared responsibility or shifting responsibility, that resonates with people a little bit more. And actually, when we, with the EPR for packaging bill, we didn't think the EPR for packaging really connected with people. So our campaign was actually called Recycling Reform Maine, and we settled on that because people, you know, care about recycling in general. We don't have to explain a lot about what, you know, most of it is packaging that goes through our programs, and reform really gets to the point that what we're doing right now isn't working and we need to reform the way we're doing it. So, and that, you know, we put out a petition. It's that we have a recyclingreform.org website that takes you just right to NRCM's page. You know, and I was a little bit nervous about this. We put out our petition. We have a bunch of municipalities sign, adopt municipal resolutions. And I was shocked how quickly everybody understood it. Like there was, the comments on the petition are all very favorable. Everyone's like, yes, this makes so much sense. We need to shift the responsibility and get it off of the consumer. So I would say, yeah, it's been wildly successful communicating this message to people if they just take 1 second or if they've already thought about it really. Yeah, and I think just to add one more thing, and the EPA and Andrew Wheeler put out a statement last month that drove me nuts. They, you know, about how recycling is so important, and if everybody in the United States could just do their part and recycle, then we'll be fine. And I think if you're not immediately curious by that statement, then you don't get it. So, you know, how can people possibly recycle if their stuff that they're getting isn't recyclable and their communities can't afford a bin to put it in and there's no market to send it to? Like, that's the problem. It's not the person. So, and rant, you can proceed. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. We have a question for Josh. Were you able to follow up on the end destination of Howard County plastics? Do our plastics get shipped overseas, and what kind of verification of what happens to our plastic?
Yeah, I mean, we have done and continue to do periodic audits, but I can almost guarantee that our plastics are ending up overseas. Can almost guarantee it.
We're already seeing potentially a chemical recycling plant for plastic popping up in the Ohio River Valley. So, and that is the industry's, you know, silver bullet that they're proposing, instead of doing all this and shipping it all the way around, to actually like physically break down the molecules and re-put them together. And, you know, pie in the sky ideas to create virgin like plastic, to, you know, to do it more the way we thought it happened before we knew all this, to actually melt down the plastic and recreate it. But that creates just as much pollution and is just as toxic for wherever that is as making it afresh. And it really doesn't make sense economically as long as we have all this cheap cheap feedstock, that fracked natural gas and whatnot. So just something to keep an eye out on, because the industry is going to be pushing this as the next new great idea, and we're already seeing it. And the county government in that county in Ohio that says they're going to build this is offering a $300 million bond to build this plant on a former Dow chemical site near Hanging Rock on the Ohio River. So just highlighting that as something to keep an eye out on.
You mentioned pipelines. There was a question about what can we do to help, stop the pipelines, because we're getting them in Maryland, even though we banned fracking.
Well, yeah, if you figure out a 100% surefire way to do that, I'd be glad to hear it, because here, of course, tree sits and everything. It's been really hard. We even got our government passed a protest bill to make protesting critical infrastructure a felony, so that took away even more of our power. I have seen things stopped in more populated and suburban areas like yours, so I mean there is some hope there, but yeah, I'm sorry I don't have more answers there. Like I said earlier, I think with all these things, and this goes back to our mountaintop removal days, all we can do is make it as expensive as possible for them. And because they're actually already operating on a very tight budget. So anything we can do, my coworker calls it the death by 1,000 paper cut strategy. And it has worked in the past in the mountaintop removal fight. Unfortunately, mountaintop removal is still going on. Much smaller scale for economic reasons, but point in case, like anything we can do to make it harder and more complicated and more expensive for them, the better. Sorry, I don't have a more surefire answer.
Yeah, I understand, Alex. It's a major challenge. I would say it's about 8 o'clock, so maybe if we can just have a minute answer to try to get as many questions in, because we have quite a few coming in, and this one's to Allie. You're asking, how can you reduce plastic packaging around food items such as eggs and vegetables?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, actually. My best answer is it's really hard for us to put all of the pressure on the brands, because they're responding to who's buying them. And so if people are still buying them, they're going to keep creating them. I think we have a very extensive bulk section, and you're welcome to bring in your own container, and you can get oil and honey and shampoo and vinegar and coffee and all kinds of different items. But really, kind of trying to take into account, and this is actually perfect with Plastic Free July coming up in less than a week, I guess. And that is a challenge to try and limit the amount of plastic that you are using in your daily life. But my best answer is, when you see something that's loose and you can buy it loose, whether it's produce or grains or whatever, to shop that way and maybe keep a list. And then you kind of will keep track of all the different places that you can shop that, are plastic free. And I feel like that's helped. So I know that I can go to the farmer's market and I can get this in this product this way, packaged this way. And I can go to the seafood counter at Cross Street Market or wherever and get my seafood packaged in paper. I can get my eggs from a reusable carton if I go to the farmer's market. So, really just kind of taking into account all the different places that you can go. And then another thing, and an easy way to limit plastic packaging is to eat, fresh whole foods, things like that aren't processed, or then learn how to process them at your house yourself.
Thanks. To Sarah or Brooke, what can we do to hold producers of plastic responsible? What are the next steps? And anybody else?
Sure. We can pass legislation like EPR legislation to make them have to pay for the products they create, right? California is passing legislation right now sponsored by Senator Ben Allen that I think is really promising and will change what's coming into California, what's allowed to come into California, the types of plastics that are allowed to come into California. I think you know, we have the ability to limit what comes into our state and what is sold in our state in particular. And so we should seize that power. You know, we should not feel beholden to huge companies that are making a huge profit while we are having to pay to clean up our streets and dispose of their trash and pay for the ill health effects of incineration on communities. Like, we are footing the bill and they are making the profits, and we should just decide not to do that anymore. We can. There's many ways that we can do that, and we can act decisively by either we can ban the single-use products we don't need, and we can put in place EPR for other types of products that we are not going to ban, so that they come in and they have to be done in a more responsible way. So that's what I think.
I like how you think, Lierman. Now this is to Sarah. Can you address the concerns that the cost of EPR will be passed on to the consumer and maybe have an impact on lower income?
Absolutely. This was an immediate question that I had when I started learning about this years ago, and I've done a ton of research. I've called a lot of people around the world, and I have not yet found any evidence of, and there's, well, just to go back, EPR for packaging policies have been in place for as long as 30 years all over the world on every single continent. 5 provinces in Canada have this. It's, when you look at the map, it's everywhere. So there's a lot to look at, and I have not found any evidence of prices increasing as a result of EPR for packaging. And I believe there's actually a study coming out of Canada any day that people can look to as a source instead of like anecdotal evidence. So I think a lot of the reasons why the prices aren't going up is because the majority of the costs of these EPR programs, say like 80% of the costs are paid for by like 10% of the producers. It's really large, huge multi-billion-dollar companies who are having to pay for these things. And most of the businesses hardly pay anything. The price per container that they have to pay into these systems is typically fractions of a penny. It's not enough to say raise the cost of an individual good. So they're basically getting absorbed. And one thing I like to think about is, if you think about the lobbying budgets of some of these corporations compared to the cost, they're paying more to lobby against these bills than they would probably have to pay to participate in the program.
Thanks so much. To David, can recycling work without creating a market for products made from recycled material? Don't these go hand in hand?
Thanks. That question is for me, yes?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, as I was pointing out earlier, and we've heard in our discussion, that it is a challenge to have a meaningful market for plastics right now, or for recycled plastics. And that's putting recyclers that are trying to do the right thing in a difficult position. And we are finding more of these recyclables ending up in landfills and incinerators in our environment. You know, for our position as Greenpeace, obviously recycling, we should not be stopping recycling, but some of these plastics have no reason to be here in the first place, especially if they're being used for moments or even seconds and then lasting for lifetimes in our environment. So ultimately, what we need to see is companies investing in alternatives, really particularly focusing on reuse and refill and reducing those unnecessary plastics. I mean, you heard it from Ali, that if, as a consumer, you have that opportunity to vote with your dollar, if you can buy in bulk, do it. Some of these products, it's impossible to find without them being wrapped in unnecessary packaging. So I saw a great question about Costco, and how do you get Costco to stop selling bottled water? I mean, I would love to see it. You know, it's just pallets upon pallets of bottled water, shrink wrapped in plastic. Costco relies on its membership to keep its business going. So if you're a member of Costco, go fill out a comment card every single day. Bring your family, your friends, do the same thing. Ask to speak with the manager. Shout it out on social media. Call the customer service line. These are ways that you can elevate your concerns. And then, not only for the business sector, but also for elected officials who, with the right amount of support from all of us, they have that political cover to do what they know needs to be done for our planet and our communities.
Great, David, that's a wonderful lead into our next question, which will have to be our last question, and this is to Brooke. What do you need from your constituents to help you move this type of legislation forward?
What a great question. I think it's incredibly important that we continue to take action at all levels of government. So that means at the local level, if you're in a municipality, or if you're in a county, at both those levels, and at the state level, and as well, of course, at the federal level with the new plastic bill, which I've just forgotten the name of. Somebody remind me of the name. I keep wanting to say less plastic, please.
Oh, the break free from plastic?
Break free from plastic, yes, from the Break Free from Plastic Act. So it's important that we work at all levels of government. For the state bill, and specifically on the plastic bag ban, we came really close last year. We passed it through the House, which was a ban on plastic only. There was no minimum charge on paper. So it was, I would say, not a perfect solution, but it was a big step in the right direction. And so my hope is that over the next 6 months, people will continue to speak up about the need for this legislation and not step back because of the pandemic and the propaganda that's being pushed by the American Chemistry Council and the plastics industry, that plastic is more safe, so we should use it. That's really dangerous, and we need people speaking up affirmatively, putting letters to the editor in, writing op-eds, contacting their legislators now to say, please don't believe this is BS, and we need to pass this bill. Also, we in the Environment and Transportation Committee have formed what we're calling the 3R work group, Reuse, Recycle work group, and we are putting together our ideas, and we're going to hear from a number of groups all over the states in the late summer and early fall on a variety of ideas to help us get control of our trash in Maryland. So we've just sent a letter to every county executive asking them whether they compost, whether they recycle, how much it costs them, what they do with plastic, so we can have a very complete picture of what's happening in the state of Maryland. And then we're going to bring in and do some hearings in the late summer and early fall. So I guess to you, I would say, keep speaking up about the need to reduce single-use plastics and the urgency of it, and why it affects all of our communities, and why it has a disproportionate impact on communities of color, and that we need to take that seriously. If we care about over-policing, we also have to care about environmental justice. 2, reach out to your legislators and your local legislators and your state legislators and just make sure that they know that you are on board still and that you think this is really important. Of course, we have legislators who are on right now who totally get it and are totally supportive, so thank you to them. You don't need to harass them, no. But they're amazing. And 3, keep organizing. Stay in touch with Sierra Club, stay in touch with your organization, stay in touch with Trash Free Maryland, League of Conservation Voters, and continue to talk about how you can bring this issue to the top of mind and keep it on everybody's radar over the next 6 months so we can start passing some good legislation next January when we get back to Annapolis. So thank you.
Well, that's perfect. Yeah, that's a perfect way to wrap up, Brooke. Thank you so much. And it's always good to end with action, and that's what we're planning on doing. We have an action slide that will be coming up so people will know, because it is hard to figure out where to start. There's lots we can do in our own lives to reduce the use of single-use plastic, of course. But there's a bigger picture, and much of that has to be addressed by changing minds, like we've talked about, in changing laws. So here are some things that we hope will help turn the tide of plastic pollution. And first, you can always contact Sierra Club, HoCo Climate Action, or Less Plastic Please for questions or information. And a good way to start is to know your elected official. So it's simple. mdelect.net will tell you everything you need to know. We'll give you all the contact information and put all those numbers in your phone. And like Brooke said, start calling them. So there is action at the county, state, and federal level. And again, county legislation will help build the momentum to get to the state level and beyond. So for the county level, of course, we're very excited about our bag bill in Howard County, and you can get updates at livegreenhoward.com. That update information will start in July on the website, and the bill will actually go into effect on October 1st. So anybody interested, they can help with the rolling out of that wonderful bill. And we will be introducing very shortly a straw ban bill in Howard County. So you can get into the ground level to see how we can really work to, again, make things move at a bigger level and keep everyone informed that this problem is not going to go away unless we act. And of course, at the state level, we will support any legislation you want to put out there, okay? And so we'll be your champions for these bills. And then at the federal level, we'll send out a link for the Sierra Club's Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act petition to tell our US senators to sign on. Unfortunately, they have not signed on at this time, so we need to give them a little nudge. But if you have a disdain for plastic, this bill is your dream. It just knocks off every issue that there could be to reduce plastic. And this is the kind of movement we really need to go with. So so there's lots of things you can do, and we're here to help anyone who wants to get involved. You want to go on, Liz?
Yeah, so thanks so much. And then the questions that didn't get answered, we hope we can send in a follow-up, try to get many of those answered. And if this discussion is leaving you wanting to learn more, then you're in luck. We're planning a deep dive discussions into the entire life cycle of plastic, from extraction to production to disposal, including solutions as EPR legislation that we've talked about. So you can watch for updates from HoCo Climate Action, Howard County Sierra Club, and Less Plastics, Please. And also the panelists have kindly provided us with a list of helpful resources. These will be sent to everyone who registered for the event, along with the recording and a 2-minute survey. And we want to thank all who made this possible tonight. The panelists, Gary Young of the Sierra Club, our tech guru tonight, and all of you who watched the film and turned out for the discussion, including our distinguished legislators. And if you haven't watched the film yet, the link is good until 11:30 p.m. tonight.
Hey, and of course, thanks to all our co-sponsors. If we can put up that slide so everyone can have that slide of all the co-sponsors, because we believe that the Howard County environmentalists, we play well together, and we're willing to work hard and keep bugging you until we get what we want. But we need to say a very, very special thank you to Martha Ainsworth, who is the chair of the Maryland Sierra Club Zero Waste team. She was truly our mother hen and helped herd the cats. And there's the sponsors and the co-sponsors. So every single one of those are a wonderful organization to get involved with.
And we had 200 people register and about 80 or 90 people attending.
Great, yep. So these are all the ripple effects that we have to keep moving forward with. And we want to reiterate our sincere gratitude for the Sierra Club providing us the amazing technical support tonight and the guidance on the webinar. And our thanks to our planning committee, Ruth Alice White, Charlie Gennicke, Carolyn Parsa, and Elizabeth Hoffman. And finally, we thank Food and Water Watch for the grant provided to HoCo Climate Action to host a series of online events to support community building for the climate crisis. And in closing, I would just like to end with a quote from my favorite author, Dr. Seuss. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing will get better. It's not. So thank you all for caring. I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Truly.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye now.